The story of Mark McCann and Matt Armstrong has quickly become one of the most interesting comparisons in the car YouTube world. Not just because both of them are working on the same type of car, but because the way they approach their decisions could not be more different. At first glance, it looks simple. One person spent a huge amount of money on a broken car, while the other spent less and got something that actually runs. But when you look deeper, the situation becomes much more complex, and that is what makes this story so powerful and engaging for viewers. Both men are dealing with the legendary Bugatti Veyron, a car that is not just expensive but also extremely complicated, rare, and difficult to repair. This is not a normal project car that you can fix with basic tools in your garage. This is a hypercar with advanced engineering, expensive parts, and very limited support from the manufacturer. Because of this, every decision made during the buying process becomes very important. Mark McCann decided to spend around £900,000 on a Veyron that arrived in a very bad condition, with a shattered gearbox and major mechanical damage. On the other hand, Matt Armstrong bought a cheaper Veyron that was complete and running, at least on the surface, even though it had its own hidden issues. Now, the big question that everyone is asking is simple: who made the better decision? But the answer is not as easy as it looks. Many people online are judging based only on what they can see right now. They see Matt getting the car into gear quickly, and they think he made the smarter choice. They see Mark dealing with a broken gearbox and waiting for parts from different countries, and they think he made a mistake. However, this kind of thinking ignores one very important thing, and that is the information each person had at the time of buying the car. When you are making a big decision, especially one involving hundreds of thousands of pounds, you cannot judge it only by the early results. You have to understand what was known, what was unknown, and what risks were involved. Mark bought a car with clear and visible damage. He knew the gearbox was broken, and he understood what it would take to fix it. Matt, on the other hand, bought a car with an unknown history. It looked better on the outside, but it came with hidden problems that are still being discovered. This creates a very interesting situation where one person chose a known problem, while the other chose an unknown one. And in many cases, unknown problems can be much more dangerous because you do not know how big they are or how much they will cost to fix. This is why the comparison between these two decisions is not just about cars, but also about how people think, how they take risks, and how they deal with uncertainty. It shows two completely different mindsets, both of which can lead to success, but in very different ways. That to fully understand why this comparison is so interesting, it is important to first understand what makes the Bugatti Veyron such a special and difficult car to deal with. This is not just another expensive sports car. When Bugatti, under the Volkswagen Group, created the Veyron, the goal was not simply to sell cars and make profit. The goal was to prove something to the world. They wanted to show that it was possible to build a road car with 1,000 horsepower, a top speed of over 400 kilometers per hour, and the ability to be driven like a normal car on public roads. At the time, this was something no manufacturer had ever achieved before. The engineering challenges were massive. The car needed a completely new type of engine, the famous W16, along with 4 turbochargers, advanced cooling systems, and extremely strong transmission components just to handle the power. Because of this, every part of the car is highly specialized, and almost nothing is simple or cheap to repair. Even small problems can turn into very expensive repairs, and major issues like gearbox failure can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. This is why buying a damaged Veyron is not like buying a damaged normal car. It is a decision that requires deep knowledge, strong connections, and a lot of confidence. Now, when we look at the decision made by Mark McCann, we can see that he approached the situation in a very logical and calculated way. He bought a Veyron that had a clearly visible problem, which was a broken gearbox. This might sound like a disaster to most people, but for someone with experience, this kind of problem is actually easier to understand than hidden issues. A broken gearbox is a physical problem. You can see it, you can inspect it, and you can plan how to fix it. Yes, it is expensive and difficult, but it is not a mystery. Mark knew that the gearbox would need to be repaired or replaced, and he likely had a rough idea of how much that would cost. He also understood that once this problem was solved, the rest of the car could be in relatively good condition, especially compared to a car with unknown history. In simple terms, He chose a problem that was big but clear. On the other side, Matt Armstrong made a very different kind of decision. He bought a Veyron that looked complete and even had a running engine, but the history of the car was unknown. There were no proper records, no clear information about past repairs, and no guarantee that everything inside the car was in good condition. At first, this might seem like a better deal, especially because he paid less money and got a car that could move. But as the project started, hidden problems began to appear. A simple issue like a blown fuse turned into a bigger story when it was discovered that someone had replaced it with a higher-rated fuse instead of fixing the real problem. This is a sign that the car may have been poorly maintained in the past, and it raises questions about what other problems might be hiding inside. Unlike Mark's car, where the main issue is already known, Matt's car is still revealing its problems step by step. This creates uncertainty, and uncertainty can be very risky, especially with a complex machine like a Veyron. When we compare the two decisions more closely, the biggest difference comes down to one simple idea: known problems versus unknown problems. This might sound like a small detail, but in reality, it changes everything. Mark McCann chose to buy a Bugatti Veyron with a clearly visible issue. The gearbox was damaged, the car was in pieces, and the repair would be difficult and expensive. But the key point is that the problem was already visible and understood. When you know what is wrong, you can plan for it. You can estimate the cost, find the right specialist, and create a clear path toward fixing the car. Even though the process might take time, there's a sense of control, because the situation is not a mystery. This is what makes Mark's decision look risky on the surface, but actually quite logical when you think about it deeply. He paid a high price, but he reduced uncertainty. He knew what he was getting into, and that knowledge is very valuable when dealing with a machine as complex as a Veyron. On the other hand, Matt Armstrong took a different path. He bought a car that looked better and cost less, but it came with many unknowns. At first, everything seemed positive. The engine was running, and the car even went into gear after a simple fix. This created a strong first impression that he had made the smarter decision. However, as time went on, more issues started to appear. There was a misfire affecting multiple cylinders, problems with the secondary air system, signs of overheating in the fuse box, and even a coolant leak that suggested poor maintenance. Each new problem raised another question. What else is hidden inside this car? This is the nature of unknown problems. They do not show themselves all at once. Instead, they appear slowly, often at the worst possible time. This makes it very difficult to plan repairs or estimate total costs. In some cases, the final cost of fixing unknown issues can be much higher than fixing a known major problem. This is why many experienced buyers prefer a car with visible damage rather than one with a clean appearance but no history. Another important point is how these decisions affect stress and control during a project. With Mark's car, the stress comes from the size of the problem, but the path forward is clear. With Matt's car, the stress comes from uncertainty, not knowing what will happen next, and constantly discovering new issues. Both types of stress are difficult, but they feel very different. One is like climbing a mountain where you can see the top, and the other is like walking through fog where you cannot see what is ahead. This comparison shows that the better decision is not always the one that looks best at the beginning. Sometimes, the safer choice is the one that looks harder, because it removes the biggest risk of all, which is uncertainty. Another very important factor in this comparison is something that many casual viewers do not fully understand, and that is the idea of value and reputation in the hypercar market. When dealing with a car like the Bugatti Veyron, the final value is not only based on how well the car runs, but also on its history, documentation, and the story behind it. This is where the decisions made by Mark McCann and Matt Armstrong start to show a deeper difference. Mark's approach, which focuses on fixing a known problem with proper documentation and clear steps, is likely to produce a car with a strong and understandable history. Every part of the repair process can be recorded, every issue can be explained, and future buyers can clearly see what was wrong and how it was fixed. In the world of expensive cars, this kind of transparency is very valuable. Buyers at this level are not just paying for the car itself, but also for confidence. They want to know that the car has been repaired properly, that there are no hidden surprises, and that the story of the car makes sense. A well-documented rebuild, even if it involves major repairs like a gearbox replacement, can actually increase trust because everything is out in the open. On the other hand, Matt's car tells a different kind of story. It is more exciting, more dramatic, and more entertaining for viewers, but also raises more questions. The car has an unknown past, signs of poor maintenance, and issues that are still being discovered. Even if Matt successfully fixes every problem, there may always be some doubt about what happened to the car before he bought it. In the hypercar market, doubt can reduce value. Buyers may worry about hidden damage, long-term reliability, or mistakes made by previous owners. This does not mean that Matt's car will be bad or worthless, but it does mean that its story is more complicated. In simple terms, Mark is building a car with a clean and clear story, while Matt is dealing with a car that has a messy and uncertain past. Another key point is the role of the manufacturer. Companies like Bugatti are known for controlling access to parts, information, and support. This makes independent repairs much harder and more expensive. Both Mark and Matt are working without full factory support, which adds another layer of difficulty to their projects. However, Mark's approach of dealing with a specific mechanical issue may be easier to manage in this environment because he can focus on solving one main problem. Matt, on the other hand, is dealing with multiple smaller issues that may require different solutions, different parts, and more trial and error. This can slow down the project and increase the risk of unexpected delays. At the same time, it also creates more content, more surprises, and more engagement for viewers. This is why Matt's journey feels more exciting to watch, even if it may be more complicated behind the scenes. In the end, this part of the comparison shows that value is not just about money or performance. It is also about trust, clarity, and the story that the car tells, both now and in the future. Another way to understand the situation is to look at the personalities and working styles of Mark McCann and Matt Armstrong, because the decisions they made are not random. They match the way each person thinks and works. Mark McCann is known for being careful, structured, and very focused on understanding what he is dealing with before moving forward. His decision to buy a damaged Bugatti Veyron with a clearly broken gearbox fits perfectly with this mindset. He is the type of person who prefers to deal with a big problem that he can see and measure, rather than a smaller problem that might hide something bigger underneath. For him, it makes sense to pay a higher price if it means reducing uncertainty. He is thinking long-term, not just about fixing the car, but also about what the car will be worth and how it will be viewed in the future. This kind of approach requires patience, resources, and confidence, because the results do not come quickly. The process can take months or even years, and there is always a risk that costs may increase. However, the reward is a finished car that is well understood, properly rebuilt, and supported by clear documentation. On the other side, Matt Armstrong represents a very different approach. He is known for taking risks, solving problems quickly, and finding simple solutions to complex issues. His decision to buy a cheaper Veyron with unknown history also fits his personality. He is comfortable working with uncertainty because he has built his career on dealing with unexpected problems. Instead of trying to avoid risk, he embraces it and uses it as part of his process. When he found that the gearbox issue was caused by a fuse, it showed his ability to look for simple answers before assuming the worst. This is a powerful skill, especially in the world of car repairs, where people often jump to expensive conclusions too quickly. However, this approach also has its downsides. By accepting unknown risks, he also accepts the possibility of hidden problems that may take longer to fix or cost more than expected. This creates a journey that is less predictable but often more exciting. For viewers, this is very entertaining because every new video can bring a surprise. One day the car is not working, and the next day it suddenly comes back to life. This kind of storytelling is perfect for YouTube, where people enjoy watching problems being solved in real time. But from a purely technical and financial point of view, it can be more stressful and harder to control. What makes this comparison so interesting is that both approaches are valid. There is no single correct way to handle a project like this. It depends on your goals, your experience, and your tolerance for risk. Mark is playing a careful, long-term game, while Matt is playing a faster, more dynamic one. Both can succeed, but they succeed in different ways, and that is what keeps the audience watching and debating who made the better decision. When we look at the progress of both projects over time, it becomes clear that early results can be very misleading, especially when dealing with complex machines like the Bugatti Veyron. At the beginning, Matt Armstrong appeared to have a huge advantage. His car was complete, the engine was running, and after a quick diagnosis, the gearbox problem seemed to be solved with something as simple as replacing a fuse. For viewers, this felt like a shocking and exciting moment. It created the impression that Matt had found an incredible deal, while Mark McCann was stuck with a much harder and slower project. Social media reactions also followed this pattern, with many people quickly deciding that Matt had made the smarter choice. However, as more details started to come out, the situation became less clear. The fuse problem raised a very important question. Why was it blowing in the first place? This simple question opened the door to a deeper investigation, revealing signs of heat damage in the fuse box and possible issues in the electrical system. At the same time, other problems began to appear, such as a misfire in multiple cylinders, issues with the secondary air system, and a coolant leak that suggested the car had not been maintained properly in the past. Each of these problems may seem small on its own, but together they create a complex situation that takes time to fully understand. This is where the idea of unknown problems becomes very real. They do not show up all at once, and they are not always easy to diagnose. Instead, they appear step by step, often slowing down progress and increasing uncertainty. In contrast, Mark's project may look slower and less exciting, but it is moving in a more predictable direction. The gearbox is being inspected and tested by specialists, replacement options are being explored, and the repair process is following a clear plan. There may not be dramatic moments or quick wins, but there is steady progress. This highlights an important lesson. Fast results at the beginning do not always mean a better outcome in the end. In fact, they can sometimes hide deeper problems that will take longer to fix. Another key point is how each type of project affects planning and expectations. With Mark's car, it is easier to estimate timelines and costs, even if they are high. With Matt's car, it is much harder to make accurate predictions because new issues can appear at any time. This can lead to delays, changes in strategy, and unexpected expenses. For a YouTube audience, this unpredictability can be very engaging because it keeps the story fresh and interesting. But for the person working on the car, it can be challenging and stressful. In the end, this stage of the comparison shows that judging a decision too early can lead to the wrong conclusion. What matters is not just how things start, but how they develop over time, and whether the chosen approach can handle the challenges that come next as both projects continue to develop. The bigger picture becomes clearer, and it starts to show that the real difference between these two decisions is not just about money, speed, or even mechanical skill, but about long-term thinking and final outcomes. When Mark McCann completes his Bugatti Veyron project, the result is likely to be a car that is fully understood from front to back. Every major component will have been inspected, repaired, or replaced with clear documentation. The gearbox issue, which was a main problem at the start, will be solved in a controlled and professional way, most likely with the help of specialists who understand the car deeply. This kind of rebuild creates confidence, not just for Mark himself, but also for anyone who looks at the car in the future. In the world of hypercars, confidence is extremely important. Buyers are not just paying for speed or performance. They are paying for peace of mind. They want to know that the car is reliable, that it has been properly repaired, and that there are no hidden surprises waiting to cause problems later. Because of this, a car with a clear and well-documented rebuild can sometimes be more desirable than one that looks perfect but has an unclear past. On the other hand, Matt Armstrong is building something slightly different. His project is not just about restoring a car, but also about discovering it. Each new issue he finds adds another piece to the story, and while this makes the journey more exciting, it also means that the final result may carry some uncertainty. Even if every visible problem is fixed, there may always be questions about what happened to the car before he owned it. This does not mean the car will not be good or enjoyable to drive, but it does mean that its value and reputation may be affected by its past. Another important factor is the purpose behind each project. Mark's approach suggests that he is thinking not only about the rebuild itself, but also about the long-term value and integrity of the car. He is building something that can stand up to close inspection, something that can be explained and trusted. Matt, on the other hand, is focused more on the experience and the journey. He has already talked about wanting to drive the car to Monaco, which shows that his goal is to enjoy the car and share that experience with his audience. In this context, the unknown history becomes less important because the focus is on using the car rather than selling it. This highlights a key point. The better decision depends on the goal. If the goal is to create a clean, valuable, and well-documented car, then Mark's decision may be stronger. If the goal is to create an exciting journey, solve problems in real time, and enjoy the car as quickly as possible, then Matt's decision may be better. Both paths lead to success, but they define success in different ways. This is why the comparison continues to be so interesting, because it is not just about which car is fixed first, but about what each person is trying to achieve and how their choices reflect that vision that in the end, the question of who made the better decision between Mark McCann and Matt Armstrong does not have a simple or one-word answer, and that is exactly why this story has captured so much attention. Both of them looked at the same type of car, the Bugatti Veyron, and saw an opportunity where most people would only see risk. Most buyers, even wealthy ones, would walk away from a broken or unknown condition hypercar because the potential problems are too expensive and too complex. The lack of support from the manufacturer, the difficulty in sourcing parts, and the high level of knowledge required to repair such a car are enough to scare almost anyone. But Mark and Matt did not walk away. Instead, they asked a different question. They did not ask, "Is this too risky?" They asked, "Can I solve this problem?" That difference in thinking is what separates them from the average person, and is also the reason why their content is so engaging to watch. Mark chose certainty over simplicity. He accepted a big, visible problem because he could understand it and plan for it. His journey is slower, more controlled, and focused on building something solid and reliable over time. Matt chose opportunity over certainty. He accepted unknown risks because he believed he could figure them out as he went along. His journey is faster, more unpredictable, and full of surprising moments that keep viewers excited. Both approaches require skill, confidence, and a willingness to take risks, but they represent two very different ways of thinking. For the audience, this created a powerful lesson that goes beyond cars. It shows that in life, big decisions are rarely black and white. Sometimes the safer choice looks harder, and sometimes the easier choice hides bigger risks. It also shows that success is not just about the result, but about the process and the purpose behind the decision. If your goal is stability and long-term value, you may prefer a path like Mark's. If your goal is excitement, learning, and fast progress, you may prefer a path like Matt's. Neither is wrong, and neither is perfect. What matters is understanding the risks, knowing your own strengths, and being clear about what you want to achieve. As both projects move forward, the final outcome will become clearer. But even then, the debate may not fully end. Some people will always prefer the clean, documented rebuild, while others will always enjoy the unpredictable journey of discovery. And maybe that is the real reason why the story works so well. It is not just about two cars or two YouTubers. It is about two different ways of facing uncertainty, and that is something everyone can relate to in their own way.